The founders were very well aware of the religious contestation back in Europe.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch in New York City.
You had the wars of religion in France, you had the English Revolution, and they wanted to avoid that sort of contestation, that sort of religious conflict, because they feared, I think rightly, that such factionalism would impede the workings of the government.
For generations, the fundamental idea that separation of church and state is essential for both to thrive has been endorsed by Americans from across the partisan spectrum. The principle originated in a famous letter Thomas Jefferson sent to a Baptist congregation in 1802. But it's also inconvenient for Christian nationalists and their predecessors because it can get in the way of consolidating political power by using religion. So revisionists have been trying to discredit this cornerstone of our democracy. And what's needed now is accurate, documented historical knowledge to defend the truth. And that's exactly what the latest book from scholar Randall Balmer does. The title is America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State, and the author will be back with us this week on The State of Belief.
If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
We need these voices to be heard now more than ever. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do these things really helps other people discover our show and become listeners too. Our library of past conversations includes over 150 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Democracy Forward President Skye Perryman, author Catherine Stewart, Rabbi Sharon Brous, and many others. You can help us grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my guest, a prize-winning historian and Emmy Award nominee, a New York Times best-selling author, Randall Balmer holds the John Phillips Chair in Religion at Dartmouth, the oldest endowed professorship at Dartmouth College. He's also an Episcopal priest, and as early as 1989, he was publishing books like Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory, a journey into evangelical subculture in America, and Thy Kingdom Come, How the Religious Right Distorts Faith and Threatens America. Most recently, Dr. Balmer published America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State, addressing some of the most foundational and endangered principles of our history and national identity. And so, Randall, welcome back to The State of Belief, and congratulations on this book.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be back here. Good to talk to you again, and thank you for the good wishes.
Well, so tell us about why this book right now. I mean, I have some ideas of what might have sparked it, but tell us about okay, I've got to write this book, speaking into the moment we are in America right now.
Yeah, the deep background, and you would expect a historian to say that. The deep background is that when I was in grad school at Princeton, my advisor asked me to help on a project that he was doing, studying the relationship between church and state. So I've had a longstanding interest in that topic. And several years ago, a local editor asked if I would write a short book on the relationship between church and state. And this allowed me to kind of get back to that earlier interest. But also, as you said, it is so pertinent today. It is so pertinent today. And, I like to say that, I don't like to say, but I do frequently say that I wish the current Supreme Court had half as much deference for the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, as it does for the Second Amendment, which has to do with the right to bear arms. I think if we had even a modicum of balance between those two, we'd be in a whole lot better shape than we are today.
Well, it's you mentioned the Supreme Court, and I had Representative Jamie Raskin on this show, and I grew up with Louis Brandeis, who was a great grandfather of mine, heavily influencing me and thinking like, okay, the court is like this vaulted institution that is
Yeah.
a safeguard of democracy. And Jamie Raskin stopped me right there and he said, Paul, the court has never saved us. The court has often been very conservative. And certainly right now, we're seeing a certain sort of free rein to the idea of freedom of religion, which has no respect for, from what I can see, the risk of that for threatening the non-establishment clause or other issues. And so how do you understand the Supreme Court right now? How do you understand like how they're interpreting the First Amendment, where we find, the religion sections? And what does that mean for the way our country is being kind of operationalized as far as Christian nationalism?
I think they have fallen into the trap of majoritarianism,
Mm.
which is to say that in their logic, because a majority of Americans identify as Christian, that means everyone in this country should live according to those principles as articulated by certain Christian leaders. But let's think about that. First of all, I want to make the point that that notion of majoritarianism is utterly inimical to our charter documents. I consider myself a patriot, Paul, and not in the sense of flag waving or wearing silly red caps. I'm a patriot because I believe in our charter documents, and I believe that over the long course of American history, Americans have always sought to live into those principles. Now, I hasten to add, we've been far, far too slow to do so in relationship to people of color, women. Let's not even talk about Native Americans. I mean, that's a whole other uh, can of worms, so to speak. Uh, but also with people with different sexual identities or non-traditional sexual identities. We've always tried to live into those principles. Now, I don't think there's any question we're stalled right now in that kind of arc of the moral universe. But my overall sense of American history, we've always eschewed majoritarianism. The current Supreme Court, together with the religious right and certainly the Trump administration, wants to negate that, wants to reverse that, and say and fall prey to this heresy, I would say, of majoritarianism.
It's
And
it's
folks
so
think,
interesting with the majoritarianism, because if you break it down, if you talk about like the ability to not serve gay people or whatever, even if you broke down Christianity and then added all the non-religious and all the other you actually wouldn't have a majority, but you have this kind of almost like this ethos that they're playing into that it denies the reality of what these rulings all mean and who benefits, which is actually a minority of
yeah,
religious leaders
absolutely.
in America. And you and I are both Christians and we're both actually clergy. And you won't see us lining up praising these decisions. So, I mean, I hate to give away the idea that the actual majority agrees with this work because the actual majority doesn't. But I'm taking your point and I'm just trying to like remind people that it doesn't actually represent the truth of America.
That's absolutely right, and that's one of the beauties of this country, is that diversity. And let's play out this majoritarianism thing. I just kind of hypothetically, suppose that all of a sudden a majority of Americans decided to become vegetarians,
Mm.
or Masons, or Christadelphians, or you choose whatever you want. And according to this majoritarian ethic, everyone in the country should be vegetarian or Masons or Christian, whatever it might be, just play it out. And that is utterly contrary to the intent of the founders. It's utterly contrary to our own charter documents.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real peril. And
Yeah.
to your point, you're absolutely right. These are people who are arguing for Christian nationalism, but it's Christianity defined by a very, very narrow group of
Right,
people
right.
who are
Which
narrow.
drives me crazy. But let's go back because the separation of church and state. Can you just walk us through like
Sure.
how we started talking in those terms? Where did that originate? Because I do think people on the right try to say, "Oh, that's not a real thing," or that we got that all wrong. But actually it was a real thing and that our founders did believe in it. And so tell us a little bit more so that our listeners are really able to understand this is part of what made America work at its beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the founders were very well aware of the religious contestation back in Europe. You had the wars of religion in France. You had the English Revolution in Britain, and they wanted to avoid that sort of contestation, that sort of religious conflict, because they were feared, I think rightly, that such factionalism would impede the workings of the government. The other thing they had to contend with was the religious diversity in colonial America. Now, when I teach my course on religion in North America, I begin early in the course with a map of the Atlantic seaboard, and I ask students to tell me what are the religious groups that settled there. This is, of course, aside from Native Americans who are already here, but it's an extraordinary diversity. You have everything from the Pilgrims and the Puritans, who were two different groups, by the way, in New England. You had the Baptists in Rhode Island, as well as a lot of other religious groups. You had Quakers throughout New England. But then you go south to New Netherland, becomes New York, of course. You had the Dutch Reformed Church, but you also had French Protestants, known as Huguenots. You had Roman Catholics. You had Jews after 1654. You had various Lutheran groups up in the Hudson Valley. And down in New Jersey, you've got Quakers, but you've also got Scots-Irish Presbyterians. You've got the Dutch Reformed again. And William Penn's Holy Experiment in Pennsylvania was meant to be a haven of religious liberty. So you had Quakers, and Penn himself was a Quaker, of course, but you had various German groups, Amish, Mennonites, my favorite group, the Schwenkfelders. Uh, and in Delaware, you had Swedish Lutherans. And then down south in Virginia and the southern colonies, you had Church of England, but you also had various folk religious practices and Moravians and other groups. My point in all this is to say that already in the colonial period, you had a great deal of religious diversity. So as the founders were thinking about how to configure church and state in this new nation, one of the questions would have been, and was, what are we going to designate as the religion of the nation? If Congregationalism or Puritanism in New England, well, people in Virginia would not be terribly happy about that. Uh, Quakers, the Dutch Reform wouldn't like that. And if Thomas Jefferson had his way and everyone became a Unitarian, everybody would have been unhappy with that situation. And so the First Amendment was an attempt to address that, both the religious violence back in the old world, but also the religious diversity that was very evident in the colonies themselves. And as James Madison was drafting the First Amendment, which, as I say, I think is America's best idea, he was drawing on the metaphor from Roger Williams, the founder of the Baptist tradition in America, and I know you know that tradition very well. Roger Williams, and this is a point I try to make very frequently. Roger Williams, the founder of the Baptist tradition in America, wanted to protect the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation. That's where we get this metaphor. What we in the 21st century miss about the power of that metaphor, I believe, is that Roger Williams was not a member of the Sierra Club. That is to say, he didn't share our romantic ideas about wilderness. So when he talks about shielding the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world, he wanted to protect the integrity of the faith from too close an association with the state.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is part of the genius of the First Amendment. It satisfied Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, who I think it's very clear were concerned about religious factionalism impeding the government of the new nation. But it also has served to protect the integrity of the faith from being commingled with the state.
Yeah, that's really important. And that's one of the founding ideas of it. Why don't you talk a little bit about this book, America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State? This is a really good book for you to pick up from one of America's preeminent religious scholars who can really lay it down. And this is a book like On Tyranny by Snyder, who we had on this podcast, which is succinct, really brings the ideas very, very concrete into the moment. And I think it's really important that all of us become aware and conversant in these ideas right now, because they are contested and because there are people who want to create a Christian nation, which they conveniently make in their own image. By the way, you and I are we're out of the garden as far as their idea of what a Christian nation means. Neither one of us are granted entry. But writing is always revelation. So my guess is even writing this, you were like, oh, I have to crystallize this. Oh, that's actually a really interesting, like, I'm glad I'm able to include that. Were there any, first of all, give us some chapter titles, and then what are some of the ideas that just really pop to you, especially in this moment?
Yes, some of the chapter topics and titles: Transatlantic Visionaries, that's looking at both Roger Williams and William Penn, who are very important in this. The New York is very important in the story as well, because the Director General of the Dutch West India Company, Peter Stuyvesant, wanted to suppress Quaker worship on Long Island. And one of the first real important documents in this whole history of the separation of church and state in American life was the so-called Flushing Remonstrance, which was drafted by 33 people on Long Island, in Flushing, defending the Quakers and allowing them to, or arguing that they should have freedom of religion. None of the signers was a Quaker himself, but they rallied to support that. Also, the formation of King's College it's a fascinating story. King's College, of course, is now Columbia University, and William Livingston made an important stand for the separation of church and state in the formation of King's College.
What I think is really important here is that there are stories and examples of why this principle was so important. One of the things you hear from proponents of Christian nationalism is all of the founders were Christian, therefore we are a Christian nation, not understanding that the difference between these different traditions represented different religions almost. I mean, the wars in Europe were between different Christian what we would call denominations, but they were different faiths. And so it's so specious, this idea, they were all Christians, therefore. I just think that point has to be made, because you're just saying it, like non-Quakers showing up for Quakers is analogous today for Jews to show up for Hindus, or Muslims to show up for Christians, for us to show up for one another.
Right. No, absolutely. That's right. This is part of the story. This is part of the narrative as well. People kind of rallying around this idea. And let's be clear that this idea is very much under attack. And one of the real culprits in all this is a guy by the name of David Barton. I know you know that person.
Yeah.
David Barton, who claims to be a historian. I mean, I won't get into this, but let's just say we have every right to be skeptical of those claims. And he argues, for example, that 53 out of the 55 founders were Orthodox Christians, a number that presumably includes Thomas Jefferson, who excised from the New Testament any references to the divinity of Jesus or miracles and so forth. Benjamin Franklin, who was clearly a skeptic when it came to matters of religion. I mean, it's a preposterous claim.
Yeah.
And the other thing he argues is that the phrase separation of church and state occurs nowhere in the Constitution. And I'll give him that. I'll give him that point. But you also have to deal with the two things. First of all, Thomas Jefferson's famous letter to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut, that he wrote on New Year's Day, 1802, as President of the United States. He said, "I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should, quote, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof," end quote, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Now, the people who are making these specious claims also claim to be originalists when it comes to the
Right.
Constitution. Thomas Jefferson is about as original as you can get.
Right.
And he uses the phrase separation of church and state, which, of course, various Supreme Court rulings have picked up as well. The other bit of evidence refuting people like David Barton is the Treaty of Tripoli. The Treaty of Tripoli was negotiated at the end of George Washington's administration. It was sent to the Senate for ratification by John Adams, who, of course, was Washington's successor as president, with his full endorsement, read aloud before the Senate and ratified unanimously on June 7th, 1797. Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli reads, as the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Let me repeat that. As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And this was ratified unanimously by the U.S. Senate in 1797. That's
Which, by the way, I have given a lecture, many, many times, including the Treaty of Tripoli. And I asked the audience, like, how many of you have heard of the Treaty of Tripoli?
Exactly.
Maybe one hand, maybe two. Right. But it's so important that was just understood. It was really almost just understood. And I think the letter of George Washington to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, there's so many different examples that we can point to that no one is second class because of their religion. This is just so important. Up next, much more with Randall Balmer. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
We all love a legendary comeback, and Degree Original Cool Rush is back and better than ever. Cool Rush isn't just a scent, it's a movement, a fan favorite that delivers bold, fresh vibes and all-day sweat protection. Whether you have a man that spends hours in the gym, heads into the office early, or is just trying to stay fresh on a long day, Cool Rush has their back. Head to your local Walmart or Target and grab Degree Cool Rush, the fan favorite scent from the world's #1 antiperspirant brand.
I turned off news altogether.
I hate to say it, but I don't trust much of anything.
It's the rage bait.
It feels like it's trying to divide people.
If we got clear facts, maybe we could calm down a little.
NBC News brings you clear reporting. Let's meet at the facts. Let's move forward from there. NBC News, reporting for America.
Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. My guest is Randall Balmer, author of the book America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. Maybe you can break down for me as, treat me as I am, someone who's just a little dense, but, trying his best. What's the connection between the separation of church and state and the freedom of religion?
Oh, I think it's very clear. I think, I think the First Amendment is America's best idea, precisely because it has worked to bracket religious factionalism from the workings of government, but also because it established effectively a free marketplace for religion in America. And what I find striking, and I write about this in the book certainly, is in 1776, Adam Smith published this huge tome called The Wealth of Nations, which is a brief for free market capitalism. And one of the examples he uses is religion. He said, if the state stays out of the religion business, obviously I'm characterizing his argument here. If the state stays out of the religion business, religion will flourish. And I think American, this is what I study. I study American religious history. I can attest that religion has flourished in America. Now we can have another conversation about the quality of religious life in America, but in terms of quantity and energy and vitality, the First Amendment, which includes both disestablishment and free exercise.
Right.
The First Amendment is set up this free marketplace. So you have these religious entrepreneurs, to extend the metaphor, religious entrepreneurs who are constantly competing for popular followings. And again, American religious history is littered with these individuals. Mother Ann Lee and the Shakers, Joseph Smith and the Mormons, Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, Mary Baker Eddy, Christian Science, all the way up to, I suppose you can even put Joel Osteen in that category. These are religious entrepreneurs who are out in this marketplace, and that marketplace is salubrious. It's vital, precisely because the state has not put its thumb on the scale when it comes to matters of religion.
Yeah, that is the perfect segue to this moment, where the state is definitely putting its thumb on religion. And
Yes.
I know you've been following this, but this just the past 10 months that we've been living in. The idea of an anti-Christian bias task force, which is clearly, trying to set up a narrative of how Christians are being persecuted in this country, which is, you may know, we Interfaith Alliance created a letter in response with 26 prominent Christians saying, like, this is, not only is it wrong and a ploy to be able to suppress freedom of religion, but also insulting to the actual persecution of Christians, which is happening around the world, but looks that it doesn't exist here. Plus the Religious Freedom Commission, which you've seen is all right-wing Christians, one Orthodox Jew. They're putting their thumb specifically establishing religion as the Christian religion, again, made in their image.
Yep.
And really putting their thumb on it and saying, this is the religion that we are putting forward. And the argument has been made and should be made that Project 2025 is a Christian nationalist document. And so, we're living in this moment that is just an affront to the very principle that the founders put forward. And if they actually succeed, will only suppress this free marketplace of ideas and religion that you've been talking about. So you are publishing this book into that reality. So tell us a little bit about how you understand this moment, because I feel like I haven't quite experienced this. I mean, we've experienced the Christian right, we experienced the Christian coalition, we experienced the moral majority, but this feels like extra.
It's very different, I think, because they now control the levers of government, and we have a Supreme Court that is utterly supine when it comes to, well, pretty much everything, but certainly on matters of church-state issues and the First Amendment. And the other thing I'll add to what you so beautifully described there, Paul, is that I think underlying this is this real rhetoric of victimization and marginalization that is being perpetrated by the leaders of the religious right. And by the way, I believe that is one of the reasons you have this anomaly over the past 3 presidential elections of 4 of 5 white evangelicals supporting, let's be clear, a self-confessed sexual predator who's not exactly an avatar of family values. We can go through the whole list, but you get my point. And I think one of the reasons is that Donald Trump speaks the language of victimization better than anyone I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Right.
Now, it's always about him. He's the victim, of course, but I think there's some visceral way in which evangelicals connected with Trump and this rhetoric of victimization, and he would throw bones to them once in a while. You guys are really being persecuted, and I'm going to be your defender and that sort of thing. But primarily, it's about him. But I think there's some kind of visceral identification with that rhetoric. That said, as you know, there's no truth behind it. I mean, these people are arguably running the country, and to turn around and claim that they're victimized in some way or marginalized is ludicrous. It's simply not the case.
I think what they mean by we're victimized is that everybody's not doing what we want them to do.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah,
that's really their definition of victimization, is that actually,
and that goes back to the whole point about majoritarianism, right? We have the right, because we have the numbers. We have the right to impose our ideas on you, on me, on everybody in society, and that again, I think, is utterly contrary to both the letter and the spirit of the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean, it is, the just what is being done in the name of Christianity, and just the brutality and the cruelty, and here you have Speaker Johnson, who has just kept the government shut down. I think hopefully by the time this airs, the government will be open, but really just insisting that we have to be able to take away health care from people, and have to have people go hungry in order for the government to open. These are the self-avowed Christians who are crying victimization, and I think this is something I would just posit for you, as a historian. There is actually a moment here that this might be hopeful, but I am seeing some energy around, is a resurgence of a kind of Christianity that understands its roots when we did move forward. When we did move forward on women's rights, when we did move forward on slavery, when we did move forward on civil rights, there were Christians who saw the moment, and they said, we have to speak up, we have to be out in front, we have to show up, we have to say what we think. And I do think you're seeing a great deal of I applaud this, and we're helping to support it, Interfaith Alliance. Faith leaders in the front line saying we're not going to accept this, and one of the things we've been really intent on since the beginning. Let's just remember that this is an administration that out of the gate, J.D. Vance said that the Catholic bishops were padding their bottom line because of their immigration work. So much so that the Pope had to talk about it, and Elon Musk took on the Lutheran Church for its work with Lutheran services, and again and again. And so it's interesting that they talk about Christianity, but it only means the political arm of Christianity that agrees with them. But I do think I'm hopeful that there is a moment for Christianity that we're witnessing that is going to respond. Are you seeing any of that?
I think there's a little bit of that, and Paul, I've spent far too many years of my life and my career trying to encourage evangelicals. I mean, and as you know, I came out of this world, and I, in many ways, still identify with the best of evangelicals. I haven't seen much, but that's very good lately. But and I've been trying to do two things. I'm trying to reaffiliate evangelicals with the New Testament itself, the words of Jesus. And, we talked about immigration a minute ago. I mean, Jesus called on us to welcome the stranger, treat the foreigner as one of your own. I mean, how you translate that into public policy, I think is a tricky issue. And I acknowledge that, but at least that principle should guide some of our attitudes toward those who are refugees from other places. For example, Jesus talked about feeding the hungry and caring for the poor. And as you said, you have Mike Johnson in Washington who claims to be a Christian, claims to be a follower of Jesus, and the way he's acting is, let's put it mildly, not in lockstep with those principles. And the other thing for evangelicals is that I want to remind them that in the 19th and even into the early part of the 20th century, evangelicals were champions for women's equality.
Yep.
Evangelicals were engaged in prison reform. Evangelicals, as you said, were in the North, of course, were trying to eliminate the scourge of slavery. Evangelicals supported public education.
Right.
because they saw that as a way for those in the lower margins of society to become upwardly mobile and to improve their lot in life. And so you have that noble legacy that has just been utterly tossed away by the leaders of the religious right.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that, because I think, one of the, you've done many things, but you've one of the moments that you really did this aha switch with me, and I don't even remember, I think, you've written about it and I've heard you lecture about it. And I was like, that abortion wasn't really
Yeah.
the genesis of the modern hardcore right evangelical movement. It was not abortion. That became a foil. It happened earlier than that, and I think just because you're in, you with me now, I would love just because I do think it's instructive to this moment. What was the catalyst for the modern right wing evangelical movement?
I say this without any equivocation or fear of contradiction. The catalyst was not Roe v. Wade, was not abortion. The catalyst was a defense of racial segregation at places like Bob Jones University and segregation academies like Jerry Falwell's Liberty Christian Academy in Lynchburg, Virginia. That was the catalyst for the rise of the religious right. Abortion was added later, and abortion was added in part as a way to divert attention from the real origins of the political movement that we know today as the religious right.
I think that's a really important, that there was a sense of, again, already like who counts in America.
Right.
And like, what are we affiliated with? And, I think that's important. When you look at the landscape of today, and this book is a really important contribution because it's really, for all of us who are trying to meet this moment, knowing about religion and staying firm in our understanding, because it's a little bit crazy making right now, where they're just like trying to say, they're only going to give money. The Department of Education has declared they're only going to give money to projects that underscore that this country was founded, and they like to use Judeo-Christian, which is just a total ridiculous. So your book, America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State, is so important right now for us to hold on to that idea. What do you hope that kind of, our listeners are from all different religious traditions. Many of them are not religious at all, but they are all worried about America, trying to figure out how to do it. Now, our tagline is where religion and democracy meet. What should we be doing right now? And I know you're not an activist and an organizer, but from your perch, what would you love to see the average American taking with them into every room that they enter?
I think truth is a powerful antidote to what we're seeing right now. And one of the reasons that I wrote this book is to refute this nonsense that America is and always has been a Christian nation. I mean, it's just demonstrably false. There's no historical evidence to support that assertion. And it's not just that. I mean, I'm looking at other things too. The Johnson Amendment, for example, which is awfully important. 1954. I'm looking at the Blaine Amendments in the 19th century.
Well, what were those?
The Blaine Amendments, James Blaine was a member of Congress from Maine, and he became Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he supported an amendment that would bar the use of taxpayer funds for religious education.
Uh-huh.
And it did not pass. It passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate. But 37 states adopted some version of the Blaine Amendment that, again, prohibited the use of taxpayer money for religious education. And what we're seeing now, of course, is that in states with Republican supermajorities, Iowa, Florida, Oklahoma, and so forth, they are trying to circumvent that. And unfortunately, with the blessing of the Supreme Court in the Espinoza decision and the Macon decision. So that's a very important moment. So again, truth, history matters, right?
Yeah.
Truth matters.
Yeah.
I think that's awfully important. Also, you asked me, how to resist, and no, I'm not an activist in the way that you are, which I admire, by the way. I do a different form of activism, I suppose. I think the other thing is that we should not lose sight of the importance of small, even symbolic acts. I think the aggregate of that resistance
Mm,
is powerful, and we saw that on No King's Day. I mean,
right.
I addressed a rally in Walhalla, California on No King's Day, and I'm sure you did something
Hmm.
similar as well. Those small acts, I think, are important. And I think the third element that I would emphasize is the importance of hope.
Mm,
Some years ago, somebody asked me to write an essay on hope, which, of course, as you know, is one of the three theological virtues in Christianity: faith, hope, and love. And it occurred to me, we talk a lot about faith, we talk a lot about love, we don't talk much about hope. It also occurs to me that hope is the only virtue that is volitional. That is, I can choose to be hopeful.
mm.
And we're living in a dark place right now. And I don't need to tell you that. You understand that very well. But I think it's important that we don't lose hope. Because if we lose hope, if we lose that sense, I think we're in very deep trouble.
Well, I think authoritarians would very much like us to lose hope because it's
Yes,
a sense of the future and a sense of possibility in the future. If you lose hope, you've basically succumbed to the moment and assumed that what is true now will always be true. I want to just shift for 1 minute to your location as a university. Universities have become a battleground for how authoritarianism functions in America. And, I coming from an academic family and many of members of my family were in the academy or we certainly valued it like at the highest level. And really one of the great institutions in America that have allowed people to thrive from different backgrounds. It's been like
absolutely.
a way that this country has moved forward, and the power of it. I am. I think it's so by intention that there is an effort to make universities bend the knee. I am curious how, as much as you can say about how you're experiencing freedom in the
Yeah.
university and academic freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of religion in the university setting.
I haven't personally. I haven't felt the effects of this, at least not yet. And who knows? Maybe this podcast will put me in the hot water, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. I'm prepared to stand up for for what I believe. But my general advice on this, and this is to my to president of my own institution here. I think the first rule of the playground that every kid learns is you can never appease a bully. You have to stand up to a bully because if you try to, I mean, look at Colombia. If you try to appease a bully, he's simply going to circle back around and make even more demands. So you have to stand firm, it seems to me. Now, it's easy for me to say I'm not responsible for a multi-million dollar budget or billion-dollar budget or whatever uh, academic institutions work with these days. But it seems to me that principle still holds that you cannot appease a bully. And I don't think there's any uh, discussion about whether or not Donald Trump is a bully, and you just can't do it. You have to
Yeah.
stand up to it. And the president of MIT wrote I think a really wonderful response to the Trump administration demands, and I certainly hope that other college presidents and other universities will follow that example.
You say the thing about a bully, and you think the use of power that this administration has done. I mean, what kind of shocks me is that they're very creative in the ways that they can punish adversaries and just break basic understandings of norms of democracy that I thought were pretty well established that we would all abide by. But that's the clearest sign to me that this is an authoritarian effort.
Well, so it's more than authoritarian; it's sadism. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And
Oh, that's interesting. Uh-huh.
it's really reprehensible and utterly contrary to everything I thought America was all about. But
Yeah, yeah. So
here we
one of the
are.
things that I've been working with is what it takes right now, the courage that it takes? Talk about bullies and like, what does it take? What kind of courage as a value, as a Christian value, actually?
Yeah.
Courage.
No, I think
and so I would love to hear what you think as far as like, what does courage look like right now?
I think courage, again, even small acts of resistance, I think, constitute courage. Showing up at the No Kings rally and offering these small gestures of resistance. And I think the aggregate effect of that is eventually going to bear fruit. Now, I'm not Pollyannish about this. I mean, we have to deal with at least another 3 years here, or a little bit more than 3 years. Who knows what happens in 2028? So I understand the stakes that are involved, and I understand the challenges that is there. But I think it's important not to give up the fight, and I'm falling into cliches here, but stand up and be counted as part of the resistance here, and do so for people of faith. Do so on the basis of their faith, and drawing on their faith for their own sustenance, because that's awfully important, but also using the language of faith to resist this present evil. And I say that advisedly. What we're seeing is a manifestation of evil greater than you and I have ever seen in our lifetime. And I think we have to rise to the challenge.
I do think that's where I think that those excellent words circle back to this book, because there is a value in our religious traditions that is not caged or contained by a state approval or not. And that, like they're trying to take religion and put it into their statecraft and saying, this is the allowed religion of the moment. And even you and I, who bear the name of Christian, but are not counted in their understanding of Christian, even more for us, we have to be out there saying, no, from our Christian point of view, we want freedom of religion. We want separation of church and state based on our religious point of view. And we want a democracy that works for everyone based on our religious point of view. I think it's just so important, as you say, to frankly wear our religion on our sleeve now more than ever, and say like we want to be counted among those who do want a diverse democracy where people of diverse faiths and beliefs, including no particular religion, have equal status under the law, and that we can live side by side with, and not everyone has to agree with me on everything. And just to wax uneloquent for a second, like I don't demand that everyone agree with me. I mean, I'm a gay man with children. If you don't think I should get married, if you want to do that in your own family and say we don't want to get gay married, that's fine. But I should have the right to live my life the way I want to live. And that's what this is so important about separation of church and state, is that you should have the right. Like, no one is going to force you to get gay married. Believe me, it's hard enough being gay married when you're gay. So no, no one wants you to get gay married. I try as much as I can to say, I actually do envision a future of America where conservative religious people have an equal place along with anyone else to live their life, live out their faith commitments, but they can't dictate to the rest of us. That is just untenable and unfair. And I think it goes directly into this question of separation of church and state, and why it is America's best idea. I truly believe that. It's the thing we got most right at our founding, frankly. I think that you're 100% right. And so everybody listening, I really want to recommend this book, America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. It is, let's put it this way. Dr. Randall Balmer has written very big, important, hefty, I won't say ponderous, but big, important books. All of them very readable. this is actually something that you can carry. You can actually digest this and learn so much, and it will help us in this moment, the more people who have read this book. And so congratulations on this book. Reverend Dr. Randall Balmer is a historian and a New York Times best-selling author. His latest book is America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. He is ordained in the Episcopal Church and holds the John Phillips Chair in Religion at Dartmouth College. Randall, it is so good to talk to you. Always. Thank you so much for all your work.
Well, thank you, Paul. Likewise. Happy to be here. Keep the faith.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion with Randall Balmer? Please share The State of Belief with them, and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to continue growing The State of Belief. Please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here, wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
We are officially heading into Thanksgiving season, which back in the day when we were growing up was a time to take pride in our American history. But nowadays, what kids are being taught is very different. That's why I love America's History by Tuttle Twins. Grab the family starter pack because it covers those pilgrims who came over here in a way that's not going to poison your children's minds and will actually make them thankful for this wonderful gift that we have been given. Pick up America's History and the whole starter pack at TuttleTwins.com.
The best HR leaders aren't chasing the latest AI trends. They're guiding their people through them. Because when change is a constant, it's people who keep companies moving forward. And right now, engagement and productivity are being tested like never before. That's where the Predictive Index comes in. For over 70 years, PI has helped HR teams turn people data into a strategic advantage, building company cultures that thrive through change. Visit predictiveindex.com to see how.
You've been told the path to success is hard work and desire, and that if you want it more than the others, it's yours. But the truth is that the competition is tough, and going it alone no longer cuts it. At Acumatica, we know that it takes innovative ERP technology and a supportive community to give you the edge you need. It takes everything and everyone. Seize new possibilities and reach new heights. Visit acumatica.com/Spotify today.